Views expressed by Hoot and Holler storytellers do not reflect those of Blue Ridge PBS and may contain themes and language not suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Blue Ridge PBS and Echo present Hoot and Holler, a live storytelling event recorded at the historic Grandin Theatre in Roanoke, Virginia.
My daddy's ghost lived with us. The only for sure memory I have of my daddy is him being carted off on a stretcher by the rescue squad, never to return home. Our home was in East Kentucky, on the South Mayo Trail, on the Big Sandy River, but just above it, with a railroad in the backyard between us and the river and steep mountains all around. I was 3 years old, holding onto the apron strings of my Aunt Dixie when my daddy died. And from then on, I lived with ghosts. I was not scared. I kind of liked the idea of a spirit floating around and being able to help me when I needed it. After Daddy died, my Aunt Dixie came to live with us and to help Mama raise the 5 remaining children at home. And my Aunt Dixie had me on my knees every night praying to the Holy Ghost. So I was not scared. I kind of gravitated to the mystery of it all. And my mama was very strong, and she lived in the present. But that did not keep her from remembering Daddy, and we, as a family, would visit and decorate his grave regularly, it being in a cemetery across the big road up on a hill just right across from our house. So in my little girl's mind, he was close by. I kind of got interested in the strange and the unexplained things and kept an ear out. Like the time that a boy had been saved from falling in a pit to certain death by his dead dog. Or the time that the coal miners were led out of the cave-in by miners that were never found. Or the time that a young girl came back to tell her mama who had murdered her. When the 1963 flood happened and the big sandy river rose to the second floor of our house, while we watched from up on the cemetery hill, watched our clothes and toys and bicycles and washing machine get washed down the river, my mama said, "That's the last flood. We're never going to do this again." And in the springtime, she moved us to Southwest Virginia with Phil. Yeah, where the whole town is on a plateau, high above the river. We moved our daddy too. 10 years later, I'm in Emory and Henry College, full of wonder and excitement, standing in front of my dormitory, Waterhouse. Waterhouse was a beautiful white frame Victorian home. It was a dream house for me. It was now going to be a dormitory for freshman girls. And we got along well. The girls and I got to be really good friends, and it didn't take long before we were traveling together to the dining hall or to the library or wherever there were boys. And on the porch and the parlor, we were study maniacs, you can imagine. Well, it was early October, and my roommate was missing home a whole lot more than I was, and she went home for the weekend. So I was alone, and that was just fine because I was going to clean our room. It was a mess. However, being a freshman girl, I was encouraged by the other young women in the dorm to go to a party, and I did. I got home late after curfew, and we all snuck in carefully into the dorm, past the dorm mother, up the creaky old stairs, around the corner to my room. And when I opened the door, I couldn't believe my eyes. I turned on the light. My room was clean. All the clothes were put away. Both beds were made. There was no trash, no dirty dishes. I was stunned. I couldn't imagine how this happened or who would have done it. But it must have been one of the girls in the dorm that was just trying to surprise me. I didn't think a whole lot of it. Well, the next morning I asked around, but nobody knew anything. And that next night, Saturday night, I'm still alone in my room and I'm sleeping, but I'm awakened by soft crying, soft kind of muffled crying. And I wondered who in the world is hurting so. Must be somebody missing home or boyfriend problems. But the next morning, I sort of checked everybody's eyeballs out, and there weren't any swollen eyes. So I just sort of had to shrug it off and respect their privacy. My mama taught me that. But I was still concerned, although I didn't tell anybody. And that's when the strange things started to happen to me. If I had done the clothes and they were in the dryer and I went to bed and I'd wake the next morning, my clothes would be folded and stacked waiting for me. If I was studying late night in the parlor and had my books and papers all messed up, in the morning they'd be all neat and stacked, and sometimes even in my backpack if it was available. And you know, those late night, I studied a lot. In those late night study sessions, I would make mac and cheese, and I didn't clean the pot, but the next morning I'd find that pot clean and put away. This continued to go on. And after a while, it got kind of creepy. I was a little spooked, and I didn't know what to do. We didn't really talk about it. But every time I asked about it, they thought I was kind of crazy. I decided I needed to just laugh along with the joke. Somebody was getting a good joke out of this. I didn't tell anybody about the crying I heard when my roommate was away late at night in the early morning hours. And I never told anybody about the night of May 15th. It was a Saturday night near the end of the school year, and I was studying for exams, all-nighters. And it was about 3:30 in the morning, and I had just laid my head on my hands and kind of fallen asleep, and I was awakened by the crying. That same crying I had heard all year, and I was determined now I was going to find out where that sorrow was coming from. So I went out into the hallway. There was a full moon, and we had great big tall windows, so the moonlight filled the hallway. There was no need for lights. And as soon as I got into the hallway, the crying was louder, and there was singing. I couldn't quite make it out, but I went to the door next to me, and there were 3 girls in there, and they were all asleep. I came back into the hallway, and the crying was there and louder. But there wasn't anyone there. I went to each door, each room, and all girls were accounted for. I decided I needed to go downstairs. So I went down the stairwell into the foyer, and the crying was so loud and the singing. But there was no one there. And I looked into the parlor, no one. So maybe on the front porch? So I opened the door, went out onto the empty porch, down the few stairs, onto the sidewalk, and that moon filled the sky with light. It almost looked like morning. And I stood there in awe, but it was silent outside. And I stood there for a minute and thought of all the strange happenings and strange appearances that I had heard of, and it all just kind of washed over me. And I quieted my mind and led by my heart, I went back inside the dorm and closed the door behind me. And there, by the full moonlight, up the stairwell, on that first landing there I saw a young, dark woman, but all dressed in white, a white flowing gown. And she was cradling a baby. And she was singing, "Oh, wondrous love is this, oh, my soul." She kept singing. I was struck. I couldn't speak, and she kept singing and swaying. But before I could even say, "Can I help you? What can I do for you?" all of a sudden, down. And then it was silence. A chill passed through me. I stood there for a minute in awe and tried to recollect what had just happened. For I was alone. As the weeks and months and years went by, I never really knew how to share this with anybody. I later did learn that there were other residents that had some those strange kindnesses, their room cleaned or their pot cleaned up from the kitchen. And there had been some people, others, that had reported crying, unidentified crying, but not for many, many years. I knew what I heard and saw and witnessed. What wondrous love is this, oh my soul? I listened as she sang and wept. What wondrous love is this, oh my soul? And maybe she passed out from exhaustion. Ooh, ooh. Or maybe she slipped or fell. Ooh. Or maybe she was pushed. But a young woman and her baby fell to there beyond, there at the base of those stairs. Oh, my soul.